Hello everyone and welcome back. With the launch of Two More Sargeras coming in 2 weeks, that's right, Two More Sargeras is going to drop June 20th, so be prepared for that. We're all continuing the gear grind, gearing up our mains, our ults, trying to get concordance, trying to get everything done before Two More Sargeras drops. So let's go over exactly how to push higher level Mythic Pluses, be it on our mains or ults, so that we can finish gearing up before Two More Sargeras goes live. The first thing and the biggest thing that will hold you back is your gear. Now gear is also tied with item level. It is important to also note your item level just because of the gear that drops from the Mythic Pluses that you will be doing. So here is the item level of the gear that drops according to what keystone you're doing. Now the first thing to look at before you jump into any Mythic Plus is look at your own gear and what item level you have, and realize that if you are barely re-rolling or just gearing up, you may have some difficulties doing higher level keystones. Now the general rule of thumb is to be within 10 item levels of the gear that drops in that keystone. That means if you're running a keystone that's level 4 or 5, you want to be at least item level 865 to jump in there. However, when you are lower item level than the gear that drops in that dungeon, you shouldn't automatically expect to 3 chest that dungeon every single time. You should be aiming for more of a 1 or 2 chest so that you can be getting upgrades and still completing the keystone. Now once we get past looking at what gear you have and looking how that affects you and that's going to hold you back, if you have the gear required to jump into a Mythic Plus, the second thing to look at is the affixes for the week. The biggest thing to note is how comfortable you are with the affixes of the week. Some examples are if you are a tank and you don't know or don't like tanking during skittish week, then that week is not the proper week for you to push a high level mythic keystone. If you are a healer and your AoE healing isn't great, then maybe Grievous week is a week that you want to sit out and not push higher level keystones. If you're a DPS and you always forget to tab target to get rid of the fell bombs in explosive week, then again maybe that week is not a week where you push those higher level keystones. So once you look at the affixes, if you are very comfortable with the affixes that week, then you can just go ahead and jump in. If you're not, then that week should be taken as practice week. If you normally push a keystone that's level 15, but this week is one of the weeks where you're not very comfortable with, consider going into groups that are just doing plus 10s and getting more comfortable with the affix before you push higher. Similarly, if you're not comfortable with the affix that week and you normally push a plus 7, maybe that week hold off and only do a plus 4 or a plus 5. Now the next thing you need to know and really implement with you when you go into your Mythic Pluses is your knowledge of all of the fights. And I don't specifically refer to bosses. There's a lot of trash that has a big impact in the way that you run a Mythic Plus. So you should always take the time to learn both the trash mechanics and the boss mechanics. Just because in a heroic or in a Mythic 0 you can ignore the mechanics and just power through that dungeon doesn't mean that you'll be able to do the same when you start hitting plus 8, plus 10, plus 15. The higher level keystone you have, the more mechanic dependent the fight becomes. Just because all of the fights drag out a little bit more, there's more time for those mechanics to take place. So with mechanics comes knowing who and when to interrupt or stun. Some examples of this are the healers in Blackroot Cold or the shard golems in Neltharian's Lair. You need to know when to use a defensive cooldown to survive, and this goes for tanks, healers, and DPS. A big one that comes to mind is Dantalianax from Blackroot Cold. When he comes out and you're pushing something higher than a plus 15, that Shadow Bolt volley can one-shot you if you're not prepared for it. Something else that you should know is that before you go into a Mythic Plus, you might want to swap out your legendaries and some of your talents to perform a little bit better during that week. Now if that week has Grievous and your healer isn't that comfortable tossing out that much AoE healing, then consider taking a Prides to minimize the amount of uptime with Grievous on you. Or if the week has Teaming and is going to have a lot more adds, consider respecking to doing more cleave and AoE damage so that you can be more efficient for the run. Another point that I really want to drive home that I don't see enough groups practice is the idea of farming a keystone and pushing a keystone. Now if you're very comfortable with the affixes, you know your pulls, every other item on this list has been checked off for you, then it's okay to push for a 3 chest when you're running. Just because you're very comfortable, you always push a plus 15, but you're running a plus 8 for AP, that's perfectly fine to push for that 3 chest. However, when you're pushing a high level keystone, don't overpull and don't focus on the 3 chest. Again, pushing that high level mythic keystone means that you should be aiming for a 1 or a 2 chest, especially if you're going to be getting upgrades from it. It's much better to guarantee a 2 chest and get upgrades than it is to try to get a 3 chest and wipe so much that the group disbands. Think of it this way, each time you wipe, you get penalized 25 seconds for the death penalty on every person, and then you also need to run back to exactly where you were, means that every death is going to cost you about 2 or 3 minutes. So the difference between a 2 and a 3 chest can be attributed to 3 wipes. So if you're pushing a keystone, remember to slow down and actually aim for 2 chests rather than 3. The last point that I want to drive home is that when you are pushing higher level keystones, there is a limit to your gear. So if you're someone who regularly does plus 15 to plus 20, or you want to get to that area, then be aware that you will most likely no longer get any upgrades. You probably have an item level higher than 905 or 910. You're pushing the highest item level gear regardless, so what you need to do is actually gain more power through external means. Now the way to do that is to make sure you always walk in with food buffs, potions, flasks, and runes of augmented power. Now what this will help you do is actually get more out of the current gear you have. So if you follow these steps, you should be able to get from someone who regularly pushes a plus 4 or a plus 5 to being able to get a plus 15 to a plus 20 done in a few weeks. I hope this helped out, and if it did, remember to subscribe and like. Also remember to stop by and visit my Patreon if you would like to support the channel directly, and visit me on Twitch. I did do a stream last week where I actually hopped on my healer on Grievous Week and actually ran dungeons with the audience there. So if you guys want to see me do something a little bit different, play some of my alt, grind AP, go ahead and visit my Twitch. And as always, good luck out there.